China is a-hole. We know this. What are we going to do about it? Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. This is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. And just to be clear, I'm talking about communist China on the mainland and not the very finely run Republic of China on Taiwan that has free elections and free people and all the awesomeness you could ever want on one medium-sized island. Now, Beijing, the communist regime, just got busted and leaked documents to the Associated Press on Tuesday of this week, actively withholding information about the coronavirus, the Wuhan flu, from the World Health Organization back in January. They decoded the genome and told the World Health Organization they didn't have it. They just everything they could do to drag their feet and withhold vital information from WHO, they absolutely did. And this was at the same time that they were locking down Wuhan and letting travelers fly freely out of Wuhan, not to the rest of China, but to the rest of the world, including places like northern Italy, which was so hard hit by this virus. Scott, this puts kind of a new light on what we understand about the World Health Organization, which up until just this morning, it looked like who had been China's communist sock puppet cheerleader. But we're now finding out, because of this leaked audio that the Associated Press got, that while who was saying nice things out in public, because that's what you got to do, in private, they were shouting and screaming and frustrated with the communist thugs in Beijing that they couldn't get any cooperation in helping the world fight this virus. Now, what this says to me is, instead of withdrawing from organizations like the World Health Organization, which President Trump has said he'll do, we need to figure out a way with the rest of the world, if we can drag them along, to start kicking China out of these organizations, because what the heck else can we do after this?
Or at least holding them accountable and having strategies and measures and processes by which you can do so. At first, when you started describing this, I thought that this was going to be exculpatory for the World Health Organization, essentially that they weren't just doing China's bidding, but they actually were being actively deceived by China. But it sounds like, as you went on further in the description, that they knew that there was some sort of deception going on, and they were complaining to the Chinese commies. Is that the case?
That is the case.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any surprise to the rest of the world that China might be lying. What is deeply disappointing is that an agency like the World Health Organization, which, after all has the word health in its name, is such a political actor. The idea that something that's supposed to be all about science and tracking and intervening in places where there are outbreaks, if they're susceptible to this kind of political pressure and they can be as deceptive as to hide what was actually going on in their relationship with China, then I think that the President of the United States has just cause to be concerned about that. But I'm with you on this. I don't think the answer is for us to withdraw. I think the answer is for the organization itself to call China to account and make sure that we're never in a position again to be vulnerable to their misinformation campaigns.
Yeah, this is a very tricky moment, because we've got I hate calling him President Xi, because he's not a president. He's a president for life. He's a communist thug. We'll just call him Beijing strongman Xi. I think that's much more appropriate. He seems to not only be ambitious, but reckless now in his ambition. First, practically inflicting this pandemic on the world, Bill. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a new border conflict going on right now with India and the Himalayas, as Chinese troops are taking up positions inside of India. Gunfire, artillery rounds have been exchanged and all the rest. As you, I'm sure, know, China has now passed a law that Xi has signed that basically strips Hong Kong of its autonomous status within China. And we seem to have a man here on a mission, and we ourselves, Bill, are in kind of a prone position right now. We're still locked down across the country to greater or lesser degree. Our cities are burning. What does American leadership look like right now? What should it look like right now?
Well, I think right at this particular moment, the president's made it clear that he's going to be holding China accountable. And I think you really almost have to let the immediate storm blow over before you do that. I mean, as both of you pointed out, country's still essentially half open and half closed. California's still locked down.
Yeah.
We've got these riots going on through the streets of our cities and so on. But in the near term, and I mean like near term, it's time to take some real action, because the Xi's fellow is he's being quite saucy, isn't he?
Indeed.
There's an element to this that I think is even morally more reprehensible, if you can believe it, and I think there's some fairly solid evidence for it. We saw Chinese citizens working in Australia, going into Australian supermarkets and drugstores and pulling all of the personal protective equipment out, just buying all the sanitizer, all the masks, all the rubber gloves, and shipped it back to China. And the reason I give this some credit is because there's a person who's a regular at the Stratosphere Lounge who said that his company is an American company, but it's owned by a Chinese conglomerate, and they got the same order. They said, we want you to buy all the protective equipment you can and ship it to us. So basically, I think there's an argument to be made that the Chinese Communist Party gave instructions through all of the Chinese conglomerates. In the case of Australia, it was a real estate company down there, saying buy all the stuff you can and ship it over here. Which is not only saying that we have a virus, it's not only saying we have a deadly virus, it's not only saying we have a deadly virus that we're hiding, it's not only saying we have a deadly virus that we're hiding and we know it's deadly, and there's not only a deadly virus that we know is deadly and we're hiding, and we are allowing infected people to go to the United States and to Italy and the rest of the West. Not only that, but we have basically drained them of all of their hand sanitizers, face masks, and everything else they might need in order to fight this infection that we've caused. So they got a little splaining to do. The thing you say about India is something that's always interested me, Steve, because I know you're a big history fan. When you think about these bloody conflicts in world history, there would be, all of them would pale into insignificance if the Himalayas weren't there. In other words, if the Chinese and Indian cultures were able to be in constant contact with each other, then any European war you can think of would be just a joke compared to the kind of slaughter that would be there with these two enormously populated countries that go back for thousands and thousands of years. I think they're making a big mistake. I think they made a series of big mistakes. I think they're going to get a lot from the U.S. I don't think they want to be messing with India. But to answer your ultimate question about what we do about it is, it's pretty simple, really. We just stop buying stuff. American manufacturers, I've also heard from people who own factories in China who would say, look, we manufacture a product, and if we make it here, it costs us $19. If we make it there and ship it here, it costs $9. Now, that's a pretty compelling argument to have manufacturing in China. But if nobody's going to buy your stuff because it says made in China, then that argument goes away. And we think that a lot of people on the left especially think China's this unstoppable powerhouse because it has all the qualities that the left admires, kind of this totalitarian ability to put all of the pieces in place where they need to be. And they look at the Olympics and all of the thousands of people functioning like very, very precise machine. I thought, it doesn't impress me at all. If their manufacturing of our products goes away, if we take our factories out, China, put this as clearly as I can, China doesn't make anything that anybody wants. Okay, they make our stuff, and people want that, and we make it in China because it's less expensive. But China doesn't make anything that anybody wants, and once we understand that, we realize just how vulnerable China is, and just how easy it is to contain this recklessness. Because if we decide we're going to pull, when I say we, I mean non-Chinese nations, but primarily the West and primarily the United States. We pull our manufacturing out of China, they got nothing. And they got a lot of people who got used to prosperity, and then they would have themselves in a situation where all of a sudden that prosperity is evaporating thanks to the actions of this one guy. And then there's a possibility of turning communist China into Taiwan over time.
Well, that was always kind of the hope at the outset of this, Bill. You know, we've been at the losing end of a couple of sucker bets over the last 30 years, and it's a damn shame. The big mistake turned out to be trading manufacturing in exchange for cheap consumer goods. It obliterated our manufacturing class, our middle class, blue collar workers, just absolutely eviscerated in exchange for consumer goods, most of which aren't nearly as good as the American or Western made goods that they replaced. It's a bad deal. The other is we were assured that if we brought China into the world economy, if we brought mainland China into the world economy and helped to make them rich through trade, that they would liberalize, just like almost every other regime in history has, because people get wealthier, they demand more power, more of their rights be recognized by the government, and governments that don't do these things tend not to survive very long. And that has not been the case. China has become more authoritarian in recent years, not less. They become more of a bully. They become more of a bad actor. And everything in this case has been moving in the wrong direction. And this latest reveal from the Associated Press just makes it clear how absolutely ruthless China is. Now, if this is Cold War II, and I've been calling it that for a while now, we're at a disadvantage that we didn't have to face when dealing with the Soviet Union. And that is the Soviets were pretty damn poor. They had a huge military, not much else. In terms of hard currency, they had whatever they could scrape together from oil sales, and that was about it. China is a huge part of the global supply chain and the manufacturing base of the world. They've got $3 trillion in the bank or whatever it is. It's a lot of money. They can boss people around with that. On the other hand, the Soviets were pushing what was then a very popular ideology. Communism was all in vogue all over the world. And so they could kind of portray themselves as the good guys. Communist China can't do that. They're not really communists. They're Han Chinese bigots, and they're thugs, and they're, you know what? The way they throw their dollars around, they're pretty much like mobsters. And that's it. It's a mobster government, and that gives us an advantage in that they don't have that revolutionary zeal the Soviets had. All they have is guns and money. And if we take away the money, well, that puts us on the winning side of history once again. I hope. Just no wars, please. That would suck. All right, that's your right angle on that. Brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Remember, content like this needs sponsors like you. So if you like this kind of stuff, please click on over, become a member. We'd love to have you on board. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.